The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Hey, Andy. And hello, Second Breakfast Nation.
We've got a guest with us today, Phil.
Yes. Andy, you are getting so good at eliminating that little pause of awkwardness after you tell me to say hello.
I think that's, honestly, I want that on my tombstone. like it took a lifetime, but I finally eliminated a little pause of awkwardness.
Well, listen, don't worry. Every time you eliminate a pause of awkwardness in my life, I go out and create 5 more.
Nice.
I am like a hydra of awkwardness. Speaking of that,
Speaking of hydras of awkwardness,
we do have a guest with us. It is. I have to say, our most frequent guest.
you say
Right?
that like
That's awesome.
That's not like an opinion. Like he's like, I have to say, I thought the second Transformers movie was the best one. Like he was just like, I have to say.
No one has to say that, Andy.
But it's like, I have to say a dozen means 12.
There are people for whom it might not be evident
Okay.
that Daniel Carlson is our most frequent guest.
True.
And if you're a long-time listener, and if you've been on our show before, and you're like, wait a minute, they have had Daniel on more than they've had me on. That means they like him more. It does mean that. It means that we like him more than you, both personally and professionally, and he's better at his job than you are. And you just
I'm gonna
know
go. I gotta go.
No, I feel like, look, guys, Daniel Carlson is here. Daniel Carlson is a film writer. And so he makes us, I always feel like when you're here, it makes me feel like we're classing up the joint.
Oh, that's way too much pressure.
That's true.
No, just keep doing what you're doing because it's the bar is so low.
Good to know.
You'd know that if you ever listened to our show, Daniel.
I do. Don't be mean. Let's not start like this.
I was being so nice that I was worried that people would think that I was
Took you
just
90 seconds. That's all it takes.
Click. All right.
Daniel, tell
Sir.
the good people who you are.
My name is Daniel Carlson. I'm a film critic and writer. I've been doing it since college, so more than 13 years. Right now I write for a website called Movie Mezzanine. I also freelance a variety of places. I've published in Kill Screen Daily recently. So, yeah.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kill Screen. Tell what Kill Screen Daily is that like killscreendaily.com?
I think it's killscreen.com.
Okay.
It's about video games in the sense of broader cultural criticism, not like push X to jump into this box. It's more like, what do these say about the industry, the media, things like that.
Are you a big video game guy?
Yeah, I play pretty frequently.
Huh.
Okay. What's your console of choice?
Right now, I've got a 360.
Okay.
So,
All right then.
yeah.
All right.
Fantastic. I just got a PS4 for the.
Shut your dirty mouth.
Not for
I'm
me.
coming over.
Not for me.
I'm
No,
coming
you're
over.
gonna love this. You're gonna love
I want
this.
that so much.
I got it for the youth group at my church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the scam.
So,
there it is.
They just have to go to my house to
no
play it.
comment. Right. Right.
Hey, I think Jesus wants you guys to get really good at Infamous. So let's get
Phil,
your
you
PS4 in here.
Phil, you mentioned that you got a PS4 for the church. Where is it? Oh, I keep that at my house. Why?
'cause it's
Well, I don't
safety.
want anything to happen to it.
Safety.
Yeah.
I'm coming over.
I actually haven't played it much, which is, my wife is happy about that. But anyways, no, she doesn't like me playing video games.
Well, I mean, they'll rot your brain and make you violent. So
Andy, actually, Daniel,
pretty
Andy
fun,
can tell you specifically and with minute detail why my wife doesn't want me playing video games.
It's true. This is
Did you
not,
break something?
This is not
No.
the case of like the
Just hearts.
stereotypical like. This is not the stereotypical like man wants to have fun, wife won't let him.
No, it isn't.
This
I
is
mean,
a
that's
CBS
also
sitcom?
true.
Okay.
Right, Daniel and Second Breakfast Nation. I hosted the second time I hosted Zombie Palooza, a multi-day zombie movie festival. I was living in New York and in Queens, and Phil flew across the country to visit me. And my roommate at the time, he had a PS3 back when that was the shiny new console, and he had the game Heavenly Sword, I believe is the name of that
that's
game.
Right.
And
You can see why I was attracted to it.
and
Right.
And,
Oh, this is probably about Bible verses.
or a crazy hot chick wielding an oversized weapon.
Googling.
Potato.
Right. And killing like 1,000 enemies with each swing of the sword. It was one of those.
Oh my
And-
goodness! I just looked it up.
Yes, and there we go. And in it, around the zombie movies, I don't think Phil did anything else until he beat the game. Like it was like, oh, this is on now, and it will be on until there is nothing more in the game for me to do.
Right.
And while that's fine in, college, Phil is a family man.
Yeah.
You know.
No, yeah. There's a whole side of me that I've just let die, atrophy, if you will, because I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Is that the term we're using? Atrophying, letting the I'm going to play video games to the detriment of literally every other part of my being.
Yeah, because I'm keeping
Stop.
that muscle strong for you.
It's a muscle.
What'd you do today? My taxes? No. Played video games for 7 hours.
All day.
No,
Nice.
Lego Avengers, people. Lego Avengers.
Nice.
I don't know what that is. All right, so it's Legos and
You're just saying
Avengers.
two things you've heard of.
So,
That's actually true.
Transformers burritos. Yeah, that's great, man. That's really good.
Funny, that's actually the next movie that Michael Bay's making, and it's already grossed $1 billion.
I'll see it. I'm hungry.
mostly because he shot the last act in China. So that's not racist. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not being racist right now.
Production jokes.
You know, it's like every white man always says that wasn't racist.
Right.
Some of his best friends made their movies in China.
Right. Some of my best friends pandered. So we're here, Daniel. We have you on today to discuss. We can ask this question a number of different ways, but I think Phil, and correct me if I'm wrong. I want to ask the question this way.
Wrong!
Why do you hate fun and want to cancel Christmas?
Who, me?
Yes.
Yes.
I love fun, and Christmas is fantastic.
Exhibit
So-
A.
So this is going to be a short talk.
Exhibit A.
Okay. Are you really a lawyer, or is this just a thing you picked up?
Exhibit A.
Okay.
I got
First.
nothing. I have nothing. Exhibit the first.
He did. I mean, you just have this really weird axe to grind with the Marvel universe.
It's true.
And your articles are really cranky when you talk about them, and even your blog on Guardians of the Galaxy, Daniel. What I love, and by the way, just so everyone knows, we did not have Daniel on the show just to attack him. It's part of the reason we had him on the show.
Sure
but not
feels
just
like it
him.
right now, but I'll
No,
let you go.
Phil did not have you on this podcast.
No.
to attack you.
I always appreciate your articles.
Mhm.
I have now seen Captain America 2 twice and just could not disagree with you more.
Okay.
Or maybe that's not true. Maybe you're right and I just don't care. That's totally a possibility.
Sure.
Like,
Okay.
but you've been very critical of Marvel, and then you wrote like a sort of blog post bullet point sort of scattered sort of like impressions, which was your purpose. Yeah, I'm to those who haven't
Yeah.
read his article on Guardians of the Galaxy. He wrote it like that on purpose. Even the compliments you gave Guardians of the Galaxy felt very backhanded to me.
Okay.
And so I don't think you hate fun and
No,
Christmas.
Love fun. Love Christmas.
But you got a little bit. What's the damage here? Like, talk to us about your sentiments around this.
Okay.
And
Well, I liked Guardians of the Galaxy. I had a good time. I think it's probably a bad thing to frame it as I don't like Marvel, period. It's more a style of action movie sometimes that I find off-putting. And in terms of the franchising and marketing of some of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I find it a little draining after a while for many reasons, in part because of the way some of the action movies are made, in part because of the way that they tend to run together, in part because of the fact that they're not actually meant to exist fairly sturdily on their own. There's kind of an endless to be continued about it because it's just the nature of the franchise. And so I understand what they're doing from a marketing perspective. Just sometimes it makes it harder to enjoy the movies in the moment when it feels like the only point of seeing Thor 2 is to just get it out of the way because Avengers 2 is coming up.
Okay.
So part of it is that in terms of filmmaking, I find myself pushing back a little on what I refer to as impressionistic action. It's also called chaos cinema, where the point is not to navigate the viewer through an action space, but to overwhelm you and simulate what it would feel like to be in that situation yourself. So the action tends to run together and blur, be very plastic and CGI, and yeah.
So we need to take those two. Okay, so before Andy,
I just dropped a lot on the table.
But those two things, and you brought those up in your blog post, are two things that I want to talk about today. So we need to parse them.
Yeah. Sure,
yeah.
But Andy, you have a question.
I do, and it has to do, and I think it'll dovetail nicely with your purpose, Phil, because my question is about the first thing you just said. Are you of the opinion, Daniel, that is increasing? And the reason I ask is that sort of like there's always a to be continued, and you just got to get through Thor 2 to get to the next thing because Avengers 2 is because, and the reason I ask that is before Avengers 1 hit and became one of the most successful movies of all time,
huge,
it was still an experiment. And yeah, by the time Avengers rolled around, it was a pretty safe bet that not that it would be one of the biggest movies of all time, but that it would not be a failure. But it was a new experiment, and when they made Iron Man, they didn't know that they were making Avengers. When they made Iron Man, they didn't know they were making Iron Man 2. But by the time they made Iron Man 2 and Thor, and then Captain America, they outlined a plan shortly after Iron Man became a success. But it wasn't a proven commodity the way Captain America 2 was likely going to be. And so I guess my question is, are you noticing that as something that's increasing, or have you felt that way since the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
It's mainly been increasing. Like, I enjoyed Iron Man. Iron Man was a great, fun, exciting action movie, and it came out the same summer as The Dark Knight, and they're very different takes. Iron Man, obviously, a lot more fun. A lot better time to be at the theater.
Right.
And it was fun. Like, you stayed through and you sat through at the end credits. They had the little tease where Sam Jackson comes in and is like, I want to talk to you about being an Avenger. Right. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're setting up more stuff. But Iron Man still functions without that tease as a movie. If you never saw anything else, it would be just a fun Iron Man movie. And as they've built the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as they're calling it, it's gotten deeper and tougher and hard to track sometimes. Also, I'll sit and watch. If I see a movie, I won't understand who's in the tease at the end of the credits because they're kind of walking a fine line of teasing what's going to happen, even though the only folks who are going to get the tease are folks who very likely read the comic books.
It's only for them. It's for them, though.
Exactly. Right. So it ceases to be part of the movie. It just becomes to be continued marketing.
So a couple things I want to respond to about that. I don't disagree with you in reality, but I think I disagree with you in principle. If that's normally people say it the other way around, but I think I think you're right on a sort of how it all plays out, but wait a minute, like, isn't that how comic books work? They're serial, right? Like, there is this sense of and all. I mean, so you have this when you talk about it, it's almost like there's a sort of like cynicism about, like, not that you're being cynical, but that you sort of accuse them of this cynical marketing ploy. But I don't feel, for instance, whether you like the movie or not is actually beside the point. I didn't feel like the only point of Captain America 2: Electric Boogaloo was to get past it so I could get to the next Avengers movie. Right. I felt like I was learning something new about that character and that they were doing things to that character and that it was an enjoyable movie. I don't feel like they're making the movies. I almost feel the opposite. It was like, these are a group of people who are finally getting to do something that they never thought they'd get to do. And chance upon chance, for whatever reason, they're being allowed to, and it's fairly successful. So, I mean, I find that I see the way DC Comics is handling it way more cynical and way more I mean, you actually have an example of two comic book industries trying to do this And the problem, I mean, although you may be right, because this Ant-Man thing may show that you're correct, but I've just, like, I've had fun with them, and it seems like they're just following in the spirit of what comic books do, which is tell these stories that are kind of all interconnected. And I also, that's what sequels, I mean, look, you can say Lethal Weapon 2 stands on its own, and I love me some Lethal Weapon 2.
Right.
And you could watch it, but so much of the depth in Lethal Weapon 2 comes from the fact that these characters have been established.
Exactly, yeah.
So do you hate sequels?
That's a really broad way to dismiss something out of hand.
I don't want to do that. Let me ask you.
Headline for the headline. The title of this podcast will be Daniel Carlson hates the Godfather.
I think it's
Let
also
me
important to talk
ask
about
it a different way. Are you the devil?
I think it's important to also realize that when we talk about stuff in the abstract, we talk about they're franchising it like this, they're setting it up like this. You're very right, doing what comic books do, which is just stringing the viewer, the reader along. That's the whole point. But then I also do
you think the story is not the point in comic books? Because I don't read comic books, so I don't care one way or the other.
I don't really follow them either. In terms of these movies and how the movies are made, I feel like the films themselves start to feel less important on an individual basis. They are obviously going to be interconnected and relate to each other. And if you want to understand Thor 2, you probably should not just have seen Thor, but also the Avengers. It's a very complicated thing they're doing. But I feel like when you go to see Captain America 2, for instance, the focus is less sometimes on the filmmaking and the skill and the story there, because it's, in that instance, it was very overstuffed and also pretty generic by the end. And it just started to feel like, here's just another Captain America adventure with not a lot necessarily to recommend it, besides the fact that it's just another in the thing that we go to see, because we've just taken on this thing now that we just embrace these movies almost out of a sense of obligation in some way, because Iron Man was a hit, the others were hits, but varying degrees of quality. But the Avengers was marketed and sold so well, it just became this thing that we all did. And the Avengers is a really fun movie. It's a really fun movie. But now we just go to these movies and they're just huge. And I feel like sometimes we approach them less as, am I going to actually see a good movie here, or just more stuff of Captain America running around doing whatever.
So
yeah, that's fair.
So I have a response to that, and I want to start by saying, Daniel, I love you. All right, like you're my boy, Blue. But I feel like and I'm too tired to say if I agree with you in principle, but not in reality, or the other way around. But I feel like 2014 is a particularly bad year for you to be making this argument. And the reason is that Captain America 2 and Guardians of the Galaxy, if what you are saying is true about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm not going to necessarily disagree, sort of writ large from the 30,000-foot view, and my response to Phil, to your comment, but isn't that what comic books do? I mean, at least part of my response would be, yeah, but I mean, you got to respect that it's a different medium. But that's neither here nor there. It's Captain America 2, or Electric Boogaloo, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Thank you. I know you'd like that. They seem to be the ones that, except for the fact that there is this organization S.H.I.E.L.D., right? I remember hearing about Captain America 2 and the Russo brothers, the directors, would be like, it's going to be a 70s style, paranoia political thriller. And regardless of the fact that, pump the brakes, it was not like the Parallax View or whatever.
It was not All the President's Men.
No, but it was closer to All the President's Men than...
But it did have Robert Redford.
But right. It was closer to All the President's Men than Thor 2. And Guardians of the Galaxy, I knew nothing about the characters except what their marketing told me. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, it was so original, because one of the things I liked about it was that there were these amazing little callbacks to things like Star Wars and Star Trek and other pieces of popular entertainment. We can talk about how there's nothing new under the sun and everything's a callback and everything's ironic or commentary or meta as opposed to something genuine and honest and original. But but it just seems like a weird time to be making the argument that they're not trying to push the envelope in story when Captain America 2 sort of blew up one of the major components of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that being S.H.I.E.L.D., and Guardians of the Galaxy stars a tree and a raccoon, and like that was an actual gamble. I feel like that was an actual gamble on their part.
Yeah.
I feel like as I keep talking, it feels like more and more like an actual attack and not an I'm having fun attack. But like that's my response to what you just said, and I would love your thoughts. And Phil, I'd love your thoughts as well.
I think there was a lot of good stuff on the table for Captain America 2. There were two really cool, compelling ideas for a movie in there. I think going with both of them and trying to glue them together made for kind of an overblown, kind of a logy, chunky movie, less streamlined, less punchy. I thought the first Captain America was a lot tighter, a little more action oriented, a little rangier. I understand that these are, like all movies, there's the unholy marriage of art and commerce, and
sure,
they're always. I mean, the studio doesn't care about you as a person. The studio does not love you. The studio does not want you to have a good time. They want you to buy tickets to the movies all the time. Hopefully, the way that they get that done is to entertain you in a legitimate fashion. So that's where the creatives come in and try and tell something funny or interesting or do it in a fun, fresh way that keeps you hooked, and you leave saying, oh, that was a fun time, I'll go see the next one of these. But the studio itself, as Monolith, does not care about you having a good time. They want you to buy a ticket and you can leave for all they care. Just as long as you buy the ticket. Sure. That's all they want out of you. So I feel like with some of these movies, especially earlier on, there was more room to, if not gamble, at least kind of stick it out there and say, here's what we got going on. I mean, one of the reasons Iron Man is such a fun movie is because they're going for it, you know?
Yeah.
Right, but they didn't
there's
care.
There's a sense of fun in it.
But I feel like that's a little bit disingenuous because they didn't care. Like, I think you're so right that I think you're also right that they don't care if you enjoyed the first Iron Man. I don't think the studio cares if you enjoyed. I think Spike Jonze cares if you enjoyed Her. I don't know if the studio cares.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So that's always
when there's less on exactly when there was less to hold up, they were a little more willing to let the director and creative team, in this case, led by Jon Favreau, have a little more of a say in it. One of the reasons that he wound up
that Marvel
leaving.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because one of the reasons he drifted away from it was due to creative differences. It's not exactly a director's studio.
What I'm hearing you say is now that Marvel has gone from being this sort of exciting opportunity or experiment to being the cornerstone of the film studio, the Disney Film Studios. It's gone from being like, oh, this is kind of a cool thing. It's like found money. I mean, Iron Man was found money. Iron Man was, holy crap, I have $250 million in my pocket. Who knew? And now they're like, we have the schedule till 2017, which from a creative standpoint, I actually think is interesting. I actually think from a creative standpoint, to be the guy, Kevin, I don't know how you pronounce his name, Feige, to be him must be a blast if he's actually creative. It must be a blast to be like, what could we do? But from the business standpoint, that's Disney going, this one better make $200 million. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. This one better make like $250 to $400 domestic, so that this can be this. And if it doesn't, we're not going to actually greenlight this one for 2017. Or yeah. I mean, I think I definitely have always felt that we're playing with house money when it comes to the enjoyability of these movies. That it is not a given that they will be enjoyable for long. So every single one that I like, I'm like, well, isn't that amazing? I mean, that might be my thing is you're like, well, it's doing this and this and this. And I guess I'm sort of like, well, yeah, of course it's doing that. It was always going to do that. It's just amazing that they're able to be this fun in the meantime. Does that make
Right.
sense?
So,
Right. I think it's also important that one of the traps we fall into, we as people, not just us three, is we start approaching these things from a marketing perspective and producing perspective, like as if I have a stake in this movie. Like it matters to me if any of these movies make money domestically or
Let me
internationally.
Right.
Doesn't matter to me at all. Like,
Well, it's like
I'm trying.
Well, it's like David
The
Spade
focus-
does that whole bit. David Spade does that whole bit where people are like, did you see Titanic? And then he's like, yeah. And they were like, well, it cost $200 million, $250 to make. And he's like, what do I care? I'm still only paying $10 for my ticket. Like he goes, let it cost $1 billion to make. If I only, I mean, it's not like it's on. Or he goes, and people will go the other direction where they'll be like, oh, this movie, it was all right. Yeah, but they made it for $20,000. And he's like, but yet again, I still had to pay $10 for it.
Yeah.
If you want to start charging movies on a scale, so I only have to pay a quarter for movies that cost $100,000 and $13 for X-Men, then we can talk. You know what I mean? But I think you're right. If it's not our money and it's and we have this act like we have the stake in it. But I want to say I'm going to go back and I think maybe say what you've made me think about, Daniel, in your writing about this that has made me think critically. And part of it is. You don't say it this way, but I feel like the movies are being influenced by the comic books, and that might be problematic because cinema is a vastly, infinitely superior art form to comic books. And if that sounds snobby, I don't care. Like
I'm with you.
comic books are severely limited. They're severely limited in scope and what they're capable of doing. And they shouldn't be severely limited in scope because they could last forever and ever and ever, as we've seen. But all they keep doing is just figuring out more ways to get women in various states of undress while various villains die and come back to life again and have 17 different universes of it. And like you said, and just be cliffhangers. And so if the movies are learning that behavior from comic books, it could become very problematic. And here's my evidence of that. Okay, we saw Captain America. Well, all three of us saw Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Yep.
I enjoyed it
Yes.
thoroughly.
Yep.
We're watching the movie, and I'm, by the way, if you're listening, I'm absolutely about to do spoilers for Captain America: Winter Soldier. Sorry, but like skip forward like 35, 40 seconds. But first of all, the moment they showed the Winter Soldier, I was like, I looked over at my wife and I go, that's going to be his best friend Bucky. Straight up. Okay? Mm-hmm. Then I went to the bathroom. I always go to the bathroom at the best parts of movies. And I mean literally like I know I have trained my body to know how to go to the bathroom at the point where like I miss almost nothing. Like I don't miss action sequences. I don't miss big plot points and developments.
Right.
My bladder is so finely tuned. I will go to the bathroom and I'll come back and I'll be like, what did I miss? And my wife will be like, nothing. I'm like, well, something happened. She's like, this happened. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Nothing. I went to the. So I go to the bathroom and I come back and I go, what happened? And she goes, Sam Jackson's character died. And I go, he's not dead. And she goes, Phil, he's dead. And I go, he's not
Oh,
dead.
your sweet
She goes,
wife. Oh,
Phil. She's like, Phil,
bless
he
her heart.
died.
She hasn't
He
seen a movie
died.
before.
No, but my point is, okay, Andy, you get to talk in a second.
No.
But my point is it was never in question to me. There is, and this is something Daniel brought up in one of his articles. That's why I bring it up. There was zero question to me that Sam Jackson was actually going to stay dead, and because of that, there is absolutely zero gravity in his death for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's a cheat.
And I mean, it does create some things in terms of like it does have it is a plot point. It's not extraneous because they use it to get to like sort of help Chris Evans help Captain America realize how on his own he is. So that's a real thing, and it gets Nick Fury out of the picture so that this thing can happen for a little while. Gotcha. And then he conveniently gets brought back when the plot doesn't know what else to do. They bring him back, but there was never a moment when I thought that Nick Fury was dead. So likewise, and the reason I bring that up is twofold. Well, we haven't even gotten to Guardians of the Galaxy. The Groot thing, I cried both times, and I shouldn't have. It's manipulative, but that's I'm an emotionally malleable person. But Andy said in this one, like, they actually blew up Shield. And I'm just like, and Andy, as much as I agree with you and think that Daniel doesn't like fun or Christmas, Shield will be back like tomorrow. We know so because Agents of Shield will be back on TV with Agent Coulson, who we saw get murdered in the Avengers.
Right.
But didn't
murdered, but stabbed in the heart.
But didn't the events of Captain America: Winter Soldier affect? Like, I have never seen one episode of Agents of Shield, but I think they are now like the rogue element, like trying to rebuild Shield.
Yes. But it goes back to the fact that they did so by resurrecting Phil Coulson. Anyways,
Agreed.
No one is actually dead.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So here's my response to that, and it goes back to what Daniel said about your wife, which is, oh, she's never seen a movie before, and that's right. And it's completely right. He didn't say, oh, she's never seen a Marvel movie before. Phil and I, Daniel, you probably don't know this because you don't watch our show.
I don't like the way that this is turned against my wife.
No, it's not at all. I'm puncturing your balloon and Daniel's, not your wife's at all.
I don't like how that goes.
I like this even less.
Oh, you're going to say Marvel just uses the same stuff other movies use?
No, I mean, sort of, but what I mean by that. But here's the
Daniel,
way
let him say it first before you attack him.
Here's the deal. Oh my God, it's like you know what I'm about to say. So here's the deal. I'm about to die, except I'm not really going to die. Phil and I talk a lot about kids' movies that we enjoy, right? That we enjoy from our childhood, like Goonies. I like this movie more than Phil does, but Never Ending Story, Time Bandits, The Dark Crystal, stuff like that.
Sure.
And something that
Secret of Nim.
Something that we keep talking about is that it feels like when we were kids, there was an actual sense of danger in these kids' movies. When you watch Die Hard, there feels like there's actual danger. But you know what doesn't happen? John McClane doesn't actually die. You know what doesn't happen in The Never-Ending Story? Bastion doesn't die. And not only that, he reconstitutes Fantasia in total.
Mm-hmm.
But wait a minute. One, that movie is fantasy by definition, and it's meant to be. And
that's true.
And two, John McClane doesn't die, but there's never a scene where John McClane actually dies, and then he comes back to life.
All the other people, a lot of them do die.
That's true.
They get shot in the head.
But a lot of people in the Marvel movies die too.
Yeah, exactly. I think your point is that these things are not new, or that these beats are not new. I think where I would come from that is that we as viewers, not even understanding the broader implications of the franchise, but just as like fairly savvy viewers knowing what we're seeing, we're like, okay, they're probably not going to kill the main character right now.
Right.
That's probably not true. So then it's like Phil says, like that just takes all the gravity right out of it. You're like, okay, well, he got shot. He's probably going to be fine. I can imagine the Sam Jackson character is actually going to be killed suddenly 40 minutes into this movie. So then it just becomes about you go along with the movie and pretend like, oh, he's dead, but you're just waiting to come back. So it would be more honest if you were kidnapped or hurt or just pissed and left Captain America to do his own thing.
That's true. I guess my point is this, and I will admit I had the same thoughts that the both of you did. Like no, Nick Fury is not dead. I guess my point is this. I see what you're saying, and there have been movies that I have felt, well, that's just being manipulative because I know that this is actually a fake out. But with something like Captain America 2, where I was like, you know what, Nick Fury is not dead. I also had this thought, but I don't care because Captain America and Black Widow think he's dead, and that's the important thing for the story. Does that make any sense?
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
I see.
It does.
I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. They do think he's dead. It just. It's then you just start to pity them as characters because it's not an omniscient thing where you as the viewer know he's faking, so you have the dramatic irony of he's alive and they think he's dead,
right?
So you go on that journey with them from a different perspective,
right?
You're all supposed to think he's dead. They don't tell the viewer that he's really alive. You're supposed to feel like he's dead, like the characters do, but you don't, and so it just becomes you're faking until he comes back.
That's true. I mean, that's true. I wonder, like...
A friend of mine...
Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, a friend of mine named Alex Halls wrote a really good piece in the New York Times earlier this summer about the overuse of death in movies. He used Star Trek II as an example. Sorry, Star Trek Into Darkness, The Wrath of Khan. And a lot of the Marvel movies where people just die and come back, they die and come back, and it starts to feel like death as a plot point ceases to matter and ceases to have any power.
Sure.
I think we need to start talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think that was the thing that you pointed out that really bothered me because it was true, which is that Groot's death.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, spoilers for everybody who if you haven't seen it, you probably have. It's popular, but
because
spoilers.
Groot's death is, and I loved this movie. I had a great time. I actually liked it better the second time I saw it than the first time.
Me too.
And
Me too.
well made and just really, you know what it was actually? Honestly, it was pitch perfect. It was pitch perfect. It knew what it was trying to be, and then it was that.
Yep.
Which movies quite often don't. I mean, I would actually say, like, as much as I loved Captain America 2, Electric Boogaloo, I actually, like, even if I disagree with you in terms of my experience of it, Daniel, I can completely see your point about what they were trying to do. Or Andy, even, like, who loved it even more than I did, is like, this is not the parallax view. Let's all calm down a little bit. Like,
That's right.
You are not making as serious a movie as you thought you were. So please,
3
let's
Days
all
of
just
the
chill out.
Condor. This is not.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas Guardians
So-
has a sense of humor. So
And it is, and just straight, like, and right, Captain America has funny lines in what is essentially a very serious movie.
Yep.
Well,
Right.
serious comic book movie. Guardians of the Galaxy is just a blast and meant to be a blast and is a blast.
Yeah.
But at the end of the movie, Groot dies, except that he very clearly doesn't die.
yeah.
But
And-
but the way they choose to make it this emotional thing where he's gonna die and where he dies, and yet,
And then he comes back with
and I cry.
no fanfare.
Zero fanfare, and I cried, by the way, when he died.
It's a cheat is the thing. It's cheap. You can kill him. That's cool. If he's not going to die, don't make it look like he's dead and we bury him and we move on and he's dead. Like either he comes back in that moment or something happens. Like when he's dead, he's smashed to sticks. It's very sad. You're like, oh, that's interesting twist. And Rocket's like, he's really dead now, and he carries around like that little stick in the jar at first. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be like your little memorial for Groot. And then Groot starts regrowing, and I'm like, okay, you are way too passive and chill with Groot regrowing himself right now.
With essentially
considering that
resurrection.
you wept over
Right.
his bones 4 minutes ago.
Right.
What was it? Which one's
Right.
the lie? Which one's the lie? Did you not think he was gonna die?
And he even says, like, but you'll die.
Yeah, it's
Well, how does he know that?
that's what's so frustrating. Like, it just becomes cheap and disingenuous. It just becomes a lie to the viewer.
It may be the big black mark on the movie for me, honestly.
That's fair.
Exactly. Like, you could say maybe. I mean, Groot can regrow partial limbs because when they're in the prison, he gets hurt and his arm gets kind of chopped, and he's like kind of complaining, and Rocket's like, it'll grow back. Don't worry about it. You're like, okay, cool. That was a funny line from the character,
Right.
and it also did double duty because it lets you know Groot can withstand a lot of damage and regrow himself.
Right.
So it was a smart line.
But then
Right.
just don't have Rocket say you'll die.
Right,
Just don't have
exactly.
him say that one.
Don't have him say
Get rid of
you'll
that
die.
one line, and the whole thing is fine.
Exactly.
Like-
Or the thing is, he says you'll die. Groot makes the shield around him. He crashes into splinters. Rocket's weeping over him. They all think he's dead. He's gone for a while. And then he starts regrowing himself as a baby tree. And everyone's freaking chill. No one says anything
Right.
about it. I'm like, okay, God, just be honest with yourself at some point when you're making the story.
So I have to say this because I totally agree with everything that both of you are saying.
Yeah.
It is the thing in this movie that I didn't like.
It's the wrong note.
It doesn't. I view it differently than I view Nick Fury's death, and other similar things. I don't think it's the same sort of thing. I think it's, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm perfectly prepared to be wrong. But I think my problem is not that they killed, and I put that in quotes,
Sure.
Groot. I think it's that they did it wrong. I don't have a problem with what they did with Nick Fury because even though I know I know they quote unquote killed him.
Which
I
is
don't
fake
think
his
they
death.
did it wrong.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Almost.
Okay.
Andy, yes, I'm almost with you, except this one thing. They were never going to kill one of the 5 Guardians in the first of what was definitely going to be a franchise.
Right.
Agreed.
It would
No, no,
it would be weird if Peter Quill was like, "Oh, I'm dead now." And you're like, "Oh, weird. I guess it's only 4 Guardians, and the main character died.
That's true.
He's probably gonna live."
That's true. But I mean, again, your point about Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm totally on board
Yeah,
with. The other thing is I'm actually remembering a moment when I was like, oh, he can't actually be dead, but he was actually dead, and somehow it was still unsatisfying. Darth Maul. I was like, wait, he's dead. He's dead.
Well,
what are they going to do with episode 2? Right.
Of the Phantom Menace arc period.
Yeah, right. They are legion, and I'm not disputing that.
It is in a great point though, because there were, to me, the 2 most compelling characters that were created in episode 1, and let's be clear, that is an effing terrible film.
Yeah.
It is. We've go back and watch our podcast that we did a year or 2 back when Disney bought Lucasfilm, because I welcomed that news. When people were like, "How could it get why?" But now Disney, and I was like, "Well, the answer is obvious. It was never going to get any worse. So at least now it could get better. It's already it's already been terrible. So but anyways, but one of the biggest problems with episode 1 is the 2 most compelling characters that are introduced in episode 1 are Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul, and they die within 5 minutes of each other at the end of episode 1. And I remember being like, who are we going to follow now? And the answer was people who are just way less compelling than these 2 characters.
Yes.
Just infinitely less compelling than these 2 characters.
Yes.
So, yeah. Groot is a compelling character. They really, again, I think this movie is pitch perfect. I think they figured out what kind of movie they want to make, and made it. And to that degree, it's beautiful. I really think so. Right. I just think that is my one complaint about the movie. That, and I'm really worried. This is me being just snobby as all get out. I don't think anyone should be able to use "Hooked on a Feeling" without just straight up saying "Thank you, Reservoir Dogs." Just period. That song was gone, and then Reservoir Dogs was like, "Here's," but then I go, wait a minute, Reservoir Dogs came out, ready for this, 22 years ago, and I go, well, I guess it's been 22 years.
Right. And clearly, Peter Quill was not on Earth when Reservoir Dogs came out, so he couldn't look at the screen right.
Well, but the people who made this darn movie, Andy, Peter Quill's not a real person. This is not a documentary.
You shut your dirty mouth. So here's something, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of attacking in this.
You're doing,
this
Andy.
podcast.
You're doing great. No, you're doing great.
You're doing great, but it's a safe space. It's a safe space.
I appreciate that. So
we're all okay.
So the whole Marvel as this monolithic thing, which is becoming more and more true. I don't want to give you the impression I don't agree with that. And oh my God, they kicked Edgar Wright, who might be my favorite director in the world right now. They kicked him off of Ant-Man, and what does this mean? At the same time, though, they gave a movie that is absolutely their biggest gamble to date to a guy who started at Troma. And they let him keep in things, and maybe this is in the comic, right? But they let him keep things in that were absolutely satirical and skewering of other major sci-fi things. For example, this to me, I have seen Slither, right? And this feels like a James Gunn movie to me. More even until we get to the end when it becomes sort of generic action, and I get that and I agree.
Right, yeah.
Until the end, it feels like a James Gunn movie more than it feels like a Marvel movie. And even the end, I mean, let's be honest, the Guardians of the Galaxy win the day with a dance-off. That doesn't feel Marvel. That feels James Gunn to me.
It's a fair point.
The whole thing where tell me that Rocket and Groot are not Han Solo and Chewbacca. Nobody.
Oh, yeah.
How can you understand what Chewbacca says, and yet Han Solo is the whole thing where Groot's like, "I am Groot."
Yeah.
And Rocket's response is, "I know it's better than 11% of a plan."
Yeah.
I laughed my butt off twice, and both times, sadly, on many levels, I was the only person laughing. No,
Well, that's problematic.
The first time I was not the only person laughing because I saw
Rocket has some great lines. Like he is the thing that pairing was I did not expect them to be as enjoyable as they were, and I did not expect the movie to be as enjoyable as it was.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what Andy had said before. I don't remember if you said this before you saw it or after you saw it, Andy. So I want to address this.
Please.
You said to me, this movie has the potential to be Star Wars for the next generation.
Yes.
Was that before or after you saw it?
That was before I saw it. Before I saw it.
Okay. Do you continue to hold that position, or have you changed your mind?
I mean, I hold that position because I also said, and this is not to couch my language any further than I did the first time, it was never a very likely proposition.
Okay.
But it's more likely than Captain America 2.
Sure.
It's more likely than the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's more likely than...
Well, definitely that.
But even X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past, it's more likely the Guardians of the Galaxy than...
But Star Wars just came out of nowhere. I would say if anything was the next Star Wars, of course, it was the Lord of the Rings movies, which has now been proven because he's followed up with a really unsatisfying and inferior trilogy. I mean, it's never...
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's literally Star Wars.
It's amazing. That is a prequel. I mean, it's
literally Star Wars.
Mind-blowing.
Dude,
good
point.
Reapy, good call, Duvall. I'll say it for you.
Call Duvall.
You can't give yourself a nickname.
But I know he gave it to me. I'm just reminding
I gave
you.
it to
him. Heralding back.
You're right.
Okay, so I know, but I shouldn't have said it. It felt a little whorish.
I love you anyway.
Thank God. Okay, but I do want to say this, and this is not actually. I hope this doesn't sound like nitpicking. This movie could never be the next Star Wars or next Lord of the Rings for two reasons that I see. One, it's not concerned with mythology and symbolism. Mm-hmm. And Star Wars, one of the reasons it struck on the level it did is it had its own universal mythology, its own sort of like that matters, and mythology just matters to people. It just does. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, and this may sound minor, but it's not. Like, it's PG-13, and rightfully, like,
yes,
like you can't. Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker would never be like, "'Cause I'm a Jedi, bitch." And that fundamentally changed. Like, while I was watching the movie with my 7 or 8-year-old niece, the second time I saw it, and they're really kind of, well, it would have been fine for me when I was 7 or 8 because I was by that time I'd already seen Stripes a million times. I had so many. I'd seen Die Hard at that point, but like that's not true. It wasn't out yet. But but she's a fairly sheltered kid, and from what she's able to watch, and I remember just being like, this isn't okay that she's hearing this. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I keep thinking, like, her parents aren't going to be okay with this. And the thing that was amazing about Star Wars, and even Lord of the Rings, even though Lord of the Rings has this violence, is that people will allow their children to see them and will watch them with their children. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy will have that. But I offer you, instead of just slamming your suggestion, I don't want to do that. I want to offer an alternative. Okay. And this might make you both catch on fire with flames of anger. Or it might just be like, whatever. I want to suggest that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, should they stay within themselves, regardless of what they do in the Avenger universe, just the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, have the potential to be the next Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like the next Indiana Jones trilogy.
Sure. I love that. I think
it's adventure.
Yeah.
It's fun, but has darkness.
Mm-hmm.
It has that real sense of danger. It's a little bit more grown up than Star Wars. It doesn't have the mythological depth of Star Wars. It uses these sort of big ideas like the Earth Creator, but it's not really. They're not trying to they're not trying to change anybody's world in any real way, right? Like, come on. So in that sense, like that's like the Ark of the Covenant, or the Holy Grail, or the stones from Mola Ram's temple or whatnot, the Shankar stone. So I don't know. That's my suggestion, that this is the next Indiana Jones franchise. Thoughts? Daniel doesn't care at all. He's like, what?
I think that's right, and I
Hey, if you agree with me, then you don't have to say anything. Let's just keep it at that.
I think they're fun movies. I think they have the possibility to be their own little franchise. The only thing that makes them different from the other franchises you've mentioned is that those other franchises were their own self-contained worlds. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Indy, Matrix. They're their own self-contained universe, whereas Guardians has characters and people and locations from other Marvel movies. It's clearly part of this larger thing. So you could watch Guardians. Guardians is enough on its own that you could jump in and just see Guardians without having seen the other stuff and still get it. But it's tied together. Like you've seen those bad guys in like the teases at the ends of other movies. They've been referenced other places, and they're going to show up in other places.
But you don't need any of that to understand the movie.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't need that to understand the movie. The point is that this
question
movie
is, will they
is
keep
part of
that
a broader.
up?
Right.
It's part of a broader network, whereas the others you mentioned are a self-contained thing. Indie is indie. Star Wars is Star Wars.
I'm
we get
interested
Guardians too.
I'm interested in them.
You know.
And I'm interested in seeing if they can keep Guardians. I actually think for the good of the series, I'd like to see them keep Guardians separate from the other stuff.
Sure.
Because the other movies really are sort of like on Earth. I mean, Thor isn't, but it still kind of is. Like so much of it's about how it affects Earth. Guardians of the Galaxy was completely and utterly. I mean, it started on Earth and then was like, never mind.
Yep.
And like it's about
something else I enjoyed about Guardians is although you see some villains who were showed up or referenced in other places, and the bad guys want a super power ball or whatever. Guardians isn't a superhero movie; it's a sci-fi action comedy in space.
Yes.
So it's a different thing. Like the main character is a wise ass with a couple of guns and some cool gear, and he's got like alien friends. It's a different thing. It's not a superhero. And one of the things I loved about it is it reminded me very much of the first Iron Man in that there's some serious moments. It's a journey of self-discovery, but it's not this maudlin, plodding, what does it all mean? They get all the wrong lessons from Chris Nolan, and they're just these dark, anguishy, cut yourself. Iron Man 3 was just, oh my gosh, just self-flagellating. So Guardians had this punch, this sense of humor, because it wasn't a superhero wrestling with the burden of his power. It was a fun sci-fi action movie. It wasn't. It's not a cape movie. It's a sci-fi movie. It's a different type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that because of that, they could do some very different things. You said yourself, it's like Han and Chewie. You know, it's a different vibe than you're going to get with Thor or the Hulk. You know, it's a different thing.
Can we now jump into your critique or your idea that you've put forth in writing and then you mentioned on the show, Daniel, about impressionistic. Let's start with there were two things, and one of them was impressionistic action.
Sure.
And I forget what the other thing was.
Gotcha.
What was the other thing?
Well,
was the other thing us? I think it was just talking about like not actually watching the movies for themselves, but watching them as part of the larger thing.
I feel like
I think we've covered that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this idea of impressionistic action.
I'll talk about impressionistic action. That's what I call it. That's just how I refer to it. You see it mentioned a lot online.
Well, let me tell you why I like that, because let me tell you why I like that you call it that, is because it's not an inherently negative, pejorative term, even though you clearly don't like it.
Yeah.
But you've chosen a term that could be applied. You've chosen a term that's descriptive rather than polemic.
Sure.
So you're describing something, then saying, "Oh, by the way, this thing I described, I don't really like it." But you're describing it, so I'm interested in what that looks like for you.
His first version of this was butt face action. So
stupid, smelly butt face action.
That's right.
I've still got that trademarked, so you each owe me $5.
That is, as a lawyer, that is totally how trademark works.
Yeah, boom. It's like I said, it gets called chaos cinema a lot online. I call it impressionistic action. Basically, instead of navigating you through the frame and letting you see what's happening and using tension and image to kind of carry you through, it's more about overwhelming you. It's about shaky frames, a lot of fast cuts, not really understanding where all the characters are in relation to each other. And a lot of times it starts to just feel overwhelming. Andy, as you mentioned, the first 2/3 of Guardians have their own punchy vibe. They feel like a James Gunn movie. They feel like their own kind of movie. And then the battle scene at the end, you're like, it's just a big battle scene from a Marvel movie.
That's right. That's right.
So when you see something like my favorite action movie of all time is Die Hard, McTiernan is a fantastic director. You watch that and Red October, he navigates the space really well. You always understand where people are in relation to each other.
Yep.
So you understand the tension and relationship within the space. So when you cut back to John McClane, you're looking at him, but you know in relation to him where all the other guys are right now and what's happening specifically within that situation.
Yes.
The goal is not to overwhelm you and make you feel like you're in the situation, which is where we've come with impressionistic action. It's more to let you feel the tension and thrill of witnessing the scene and being a part of it that way. It's giving you a clear idea of what's happening in the action scene versus just kind of pummeling you with lights and effects and not
Wait a
really.
minute. Okay, but now you're getting this. But I guess what I'm saying is, let's say all that's true. I'm not sure why that makes one superior to the other one. I'm really not sure, and I'm not trying to play dumb. And maybe Andy will jump in here. But like so for instance, you wrote a review about Captain Phillips which you just hated, and all the things you were saying, I just disagreed with you. Like I thought.
Right.
Like, well, or rather, I don't know that I disagreed with you in terms of what you said you saw happening. It's just that I didn't think of it as bad. Like, I think so.
Right.
What is you're starting out by saying this is a choice of how they make the action, but then you're ending up sort of saying like it's almost like it sounds like you're saying that is not a creative decision.
Right.
But it seems like that is its own creative decision to choose. Why is it a given that we should know where every single person is in relation to each other in an action?
It is a choice. It's a choice that they make, and it creates a different feel in the action movie. It's just where things have evolved to now. I find it from a film experience standpoint fundamentally inferior.
Okay.
In part because it stops making sense. It just becomes about the onslaught. It's not so much
but
about... But
isn't the onslaught its own statement? That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So for instance,
I think,
isn't you not knowing where you are and what's going on in relation to others
sometimes,
the point with Captain Phillips, for instance?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it can be. I think a lot of times, though, when you see a lot of action movies that have started to blur together in terms of their action and their final battles. I mean, Captain America 2 and Guardians, the final battles are almost the same. There's no real sense of difference there, no real sense of identity.
Yeah.
A big ship is exploding.
Yeah, there's a big ship in the sky
ground.
that's exploding. There's a lot of CGI ships falling to the ground. This guy's shooting over there. I guess he's near the main action. I'm not totally sure.
And it's just kind of going from person to person to person, showing that each one of them is in fact doing something. Whereas if you look at Return of the Jedi, there's 3 finales that are happening, right? There's the Battle of Endor, there's the starships trying to get to the Death Star, and there's Luke and Daniel just went black. Andy, is he gone? Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay. So there's the fight on Endor, there's the Death Star thing, and then there's Luke fighting Emperor Vader. And all 3 of those are happening, but you know exactly what's happening within them, and they're cutting back and forth. And you also understand how they matter to each other, because beforehand it goes, here are the things that need to happen. Right. And then it happens. That's right. I'll use Return of the Jedi for positive filmmaking experience.
As you should. So
thank you.
So here's my thought on this, and I wouldn't say I'm uniquely qualified, but for myself at this moment I am uniquely qualified because I just recently experienced Daniel, I don't know if you've seen this. Phil, I know you haven't. I just recently watched The Raid 2.
Have not.
Yes.
Have you seen, Daniel, have you seen the first Raid? Have you seen The Raid?
I have not. I'm sorry, I haven't.
They are so here's the like they are. I mean, the first one is it's like the apocalypto of martial arts movies. It's like here's 5 minutes of setup and then 90 minutes of punching.
You don't hear apocalypto referenced enough, so good job.
There you go. And this
you'll hear it a lot on this podcast.
That's right. That's right. And the Raid 2 is like I don't even know what it's like. I've never seen a movie like it. It is the movie that had he lived longer, Bruce Lee, if everything had gone right, might have made. And yet like Gareth Evans is a young guy, and Iko Uwais, I don't know how to say his name, the star is like 31. It's an astonishing movie. It's one of the best action movies I've ever seen in my life. And the thing about it is there are a bunch of action or fight scenes that involve either a bunch of people fighting a bunch of other people or one person fighting a bunch of other people. And it because of the way that the action is choreographed, you always know where people are. It even goes so far as to like the old problem with action movies, like there are 12 people around them. Why are they fighting them one at a time? It even like usually answers that question at least partially, right? Which is amazing.
Asians are so good at math.
Gareth Evans is Welsh, but that's okay. That's okay.
But the movie's Asian.
It's true. Still a Welsh guy directing it and doing the choreo. It's fine.
Did he write it? Did he write it?
Maybe. I don't know.
I'll bet an Asian wrote it.
Wow.
I'm just kidding about all the things I'm saying. It doesn't make none of it makes sense, people.
And so what I
you
find
guys.
the difference, nothing but love. Folks, if you think Phil's racist, you're not paying enough attention.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, go ahead.
Because you don't realize just how racist he is. And I think the difference is like there is. It's hard to put into words, Phil, but I am coming to Daniel's way of thinking on this. Like there is, you wouldn't think that in and of itself.
Come on over.
Plenty of room on the bandwagon. You wouldn't think that in and of itself there is something better. It's just like a different style. And you know what? When you've got a bunch of superheroes fighting an army of aliens above New York, maybe it's better that I'm not like part of the action. I'm just like seeing it as if I were a guy on the. You know what I don't have? Superpowers. But there is a level of connection that I got with the Raid 2. It makes it more intimate and immediate, and there's a level of understanding that helps that, and I think it has to do with sort of the choreography, both of the people and of the camera, how the camera moves through the space. I think it's important. I do. That's what I got. I'm done. I'm spent.
But you also are someone who enjoys all the action that that Daniel is denigrating.
It's true, but I mean, Daniel rightly pointed out that, I mean, I looked at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, and I didn't not enjoy it. I enjoyed it fine, but here's what I enjoyed about the end of Guardians of the Galaxy. I enjoyed the fact that the stuff in the ship was interestingly staged. I enjoyed the fact that Rocket Raccoon had a moment with Peter Serafinowicz before he died, and also, like, when the falling ship obliterated the ship next to Rocket, I enjoyed the moment where Rocket looked over and was like, man, that could have been me, and there's no real reason it wasn't me. But that was shot not in the same way that the rest of it was shot, which is a bunch of CGI stuff moving around and you are removed from it in some way, right? There's a difference between that and filming down a hallway so that when Groot extends his arm through 12 people and bangs them around like a pinball machine.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like, that is geography. That's not just choreography, it's geography.
It's geography of the frame, yeah.
Right.
And that's the difference. You can't, I defy you to tell me, like, 5 things that happened in the dogfight battle outside of the big warship at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy that didn't involve Rocket Raccoon. You know?
Yeah. No, I'm all for this, and this makes a lot more sense too when you think about Thor: The Dark World, because the climax of that movie was so utterly nonsensical and ridiculous, and actually kind of made a joke out of the whole. Did you see Thor: The Dark World, Daniel?
No.
Okay, you need to watch it now. I don't care if you won't like it, but you need to watch it because Sorry, buddy. You're a film actor. You're a film critic. This is what you do.
Yeah, I know.
Plus, Kat Dennings in it. You'll be fine. But like this, like you need to watch it because the climax. It's almost like it. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was a parody of impressionistic action
Yeah.
sequences. Like
Yes.
that's because it almost like makes fun of like how impossibly ridiculous it is to understand what's going on.
The geography of the final fight
And-
takes them through like all of the 9 realms.
All at once.
All at once.
And by the way, you feel the stakes for Thor: The Dark World are that the entire universe or multiverse or whatever will be completely and utterly annihilated, and you feel the gravity of that for about 0.00 seconds.
It's true.
Right.
That's true.
Like there's no interest in actually portraying the gravity of the fact that the entire existence of all things is about to be annihilated. Nope, none. Zip, zilch. It's just I really hated that movie in a lot of ways.
It's true.
Saw it twice. Hate.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. That's a whole other subject.
That was a fairly
The
major
source of it did have some great
failure.
lines in it.
It's true.
My cousin, my brother-in-law made me and my father-in-law T-shirts that said "Trust my rage," because Loki says that at one point. He's like, "How do I know I can trust you?" And he's like, "Trust my rage." And I was like, and I leaned over and I was like, "That's my motto." And actually, I said to my father-in-law, "That should be your motto." And then my brother-in-law made us shirts, so we have shirts that say "Trust my rage" on them. So,
Awesome.
but other than that,
Doing it right. Right there.
you know what I want to say? We talked about in a previous podcast. Actually, I don't know if we're gonna. We've Andy and I recorded a podcast that may or may not go on before or after this. I haven't decided. We haven't decided yet. But we did a podcast on the movie called Snowpiercer, which we were talking about. Is an action movie that is thoughtful and has many issues, but is inventive, creative, intelligent. And by the way, has action sequences that are completely followable, but even when they're chaotic, because it is literally held in one room in a train, and so it goes from room to room to room. So you actually can see, you have a geography that you can understand, and you can guess people are. But the reason I bring it up is we were talking about how neither of us felt like this should be considered one of the best movies of the year. But it might have to be just based on what else is coming out, and that this movie should not be the greatest action thing going on. This should be what we're seeing here should be the bare minimum. And no offense to it, but like this should be what we generally expect.
This is what
and then
we
movies
should be able to
excel
accept.
beyond that.
Right.
And the reality is we need to be critical of these Marvel movies, basically because these are the movies that are now being considered like these are the action movies now. All action movies, and I don't even want to use the term blockbuster because I think all big budget action movies are essentially Marvel movies or something of that ilk.
Yep.
And Transformers and DC Comics aren't Marvel, but or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they're all basically comic book movies essentially.
Yep.
Are now what big budget action movies are becoming. And the problem is Guardians of the Galaxy is a total blast. It is not groundbreaking in any way. It's
true.
and that's okay. It doesn't need to be, unless it's going to be the definitive action movie of this generation. If it's going to be the definitive action movie of this generation, it damn well better be really innovative.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so that is a concern that I have, even while I'm enjoyed the heck out of this movie, and will absolutely see the next one. And loved Chris Pratt, loved Zoe Saldana, loved the Iron Giant. Loved Batista. I loved everybody. I loved him. I loved John C. Reilly. Just great. Thank God they got one of the greatest actresses of our time to have 2 lines, throwaway lines in this movie. Glenn Close must have just been like, "Why am I here? What am I doing here?"
That's
but
right.
it gave it such gravity. And it's fine. But like they did it great. They made a really well-made, pitch-perfect movie.
Let's hear it from Michael Rooker, by the way. Let's hear it from Michael Rooker.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Who ever thought that guy, when you saw Days of Thunder, who ever thought that guy was going to have such a career?
Fair. I interrupted you right before, as you were saying my point is. Please, tell me.
My
tell us
biggest
the
point is just, I'm just actually, my big point is what I'm reiterating, which is like this is a very fine movie. The definitive action movie of this generation better be better than this. And that's my concern.
I not only agree with you, I put forward to the both of you The Raid 2. And I'm not
Okay.
even kidding. I see The Raid.
But it's not gonna.
It's awesome.
Oh, I don't. I'm not saying better action movies aren't coming out. I'm saying, will they be considered definitive? Will they be the ones that people watch? Die Hard, which we keep talking about, and you worry, of course, that the three of us grew up in that time frame. But I mean, Die Hard is beyond our generation, really considered one of the great action films of all time.
Right.
It was a blockbuster. It was a hit. It was a big movie.
Right. Yeah.
Part of the thing is the action genre is by nature a populist genre. Like it's here's your popcorn, like have a good time.
Yeah.
And so are they intelligent? You know? And so to that degree, maybe Iron Man was the one. You know?
Perhaps. I think there's another and this is harder to discern and in any way it's significantly less direct. I think the other way for something to become definitive, whether or not we ever label it as such, is it's not just people like us, it's other filmmakers, and I think that like the Raid movies are being watched by other filmmakers more so than the Marvel movies in terms of like, let me see what I can do, right? Because people go to filmmakers, if they see the Marvel movies, they're seeing it as a moviegoer. But the Raid movies are maybe actually because you have to seek them out a little bit. You don't have to seek out Guardians of the Galaxy. It's everywhere, right? But there is something like, I haven't just heard this is fun. I've heard it's a really great movie too. And that, I feel like that's probably different. When that makes it to a filmmaker than when it just makes it to the general population. I am literally thinking out loud. I could be totally wrong here, but that's So
Daniel, thoughts? Or have you checked out and now you're just reading other things?
Not reading other things. I don't have anything to follow up. I think Andy's got a good point.
Yes.
Okay. Nothing contentious to add.
Oh man.
Sorry.
So no, it's good. It's good. Are we done? Do we want to say more?
I feel good.
So, well, no. I want to ask a couple questions and then we can go home.
Phil.
Daniel. So, do you have hope? Do you have a desire for the Marvel movies to be good? Do you care one way or the other?
Yeah,
I know on principle you do.
I do, yeah.
But I'm saying, do you feel a vested interest in the Marvel movies?
No.
Okay. But you're seeing all of them mostly, right?
No.
Okay.
I didn't see Thor 2. I didn't see Thor 2. I didn't see Iron Man 2.
Iron Man 2 is so good. I actually really want you to see Iron Man 2. The great thing about Iron Man 1 and 2 is it's just like, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy.
Right. I saw the Hulk with was that the Ed Norton one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that one. I saw that. So I've seen most of them. Actually, turns out I just haven't seen Thor 2 or Iron Man 2, but I think I've seen the rest. Yeah. Okay.
Iron Man 2, and I do think you should see it. Iron Man 2 leaves out the moment that the villain dies. Like it does. They.
Oh gosh, oh my gosh.
Like they do this thing where it's like the villain's about to die, and then it's like, here's a shot of a meadow a mile away, and then it's back, and like the villain's dead on the ground, and it's like, wait, it's not a shot of a meadow a mile away, but like you're way.
I have to think about that.
Far
right.
away. It's it's very strange. It takes me out of the movie every time I watch it.
Weird.
Okay, Andy, you have a vested interest in the Marvel, and you don't have any money, but you have a vested interest in the Marvel movies being good.
I mean, I do.
What does that mean?
Right. What do you mean by that?
I think that he has a personal desire, Andy is a fanboy. And he's not a comic book reader, but he is like on board with the Marvel Universe thing, and he wants them and he plans on seeing all of them. At least so far, it's been the case.
That's true.
And so far, he's mostly liked them and talks positively about them.
That's
so my
true.
guess is he's like, oh my god, the next one, what's it going to be? I'm gonna see that. That's what I mean by that. I'm like I am somewhere in the middle where I was really reluctant about Captain America 2, but I went and saw it. You know. So, like, I feel like I feel like I might be exactly the kind of lemming that you're talking about, Daniel, that feels compelled to see these movies. Though I don't
Yeah.
care about comic books, though I have no emotional baggage other than the fact that I have watched these movies. I've watched all of them so far. So there is a part of me that's like, look, Andy and I watched every single Mel Gibson movie. Now, anytime Mel Gibson makes a movie, I have to see it. It kind of doesn't matter how I feel about it. You're talking to a guy who sat through the last 2 seasons of The Office. The Office.
Right.
The last
Pretty
2
bad.
seasons.
That's pretty bad.
Andy and
I
Pam.
can't help you with those compulsions then.
Nah, but Andy watched the last 4 seasons of How I Met Your Mother and is still here to talk about it.
It's true.
So, and doesn't even act like he regrets it. That's the weird part.
Oh no,
Oh,
no,
so-
no! That's because it hurts too much to talk about.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Although I did like the finale more than most people seemed to.
Okay.
And Daniel, actually, I'd love to talk to you about this at some point because I agree with most of what you said, but also disagree with some of the stuff. But regardless, if we were a sitcom podcast, we would have that discussion now, and I really don't want to. So
Okay,
there's
the
that.
last thing, the last thing, and then we're done. Daniel, without explanation, 3 movies from 2014 that you have unabashedly liked or loved. Just
Can I pull up my list real quick?
Just
of
enjoy.
what I've seen.
yes, but you can't talk about the movies. We're not gonna just you're naming 3
No,
movies.
yeah, I will. I have the worst
Yeah.
memory, so I've got to pull up my list, or I will have forgotten what all.
By the
I've
way,
seen, which
my-
I know sounds embarrassing.
Because of Daniel, Andy and I both last year made lists of every movie we saw in the theater, and when we saw them, Andy, I have not been making a list for 2014.
I was making a list, and I'm not really good at keeping up with it. But I was pretty good at 2013.
20
so you
yeah.
want movies from 2014 that I thought were great, right?
Yeah.
With no explanation.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Ding, ding,
Okay.
ding. Awesome.
He's like, and see it 3 times?
No, The Immigrant.
Oh man, I wanted to see that and didn't get to.
I don't remember what that movie is.
It was like Joaquin Phoenix and was it Juliette Binoche?
Marion Cotillard.
I apologize for confusing my Frenchies. It was Marion Cotillard
Racist.
and Joaquin Phoenix. Well, that's again, yes, against French, sure. That's still I think that's still an acceptable prejudice in our country.
Right.
In a movie directed by someone who matters,
James Gray.
and then and just completely existed. It was in art house flicks for
Okay.
like a week and then
Okay,
disappeared.
I've got a third one.
Okay.
Jodorowsky's Dune.
Wow. Okay.
Was that a documentary?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
I have only seen one of those. I agree with you on Grand Budapest Hotel.
I really want to see The Immigrant. I will probably not see the Jodorowsky's Doom thing.
The Immigrant is currently streaming on Netflix.
Yahtzee.
Oh.
That helps.
Okay.
It
helps.
it does help.
I'm a little.
Daniel, it helps.
I'm strangely personally offended by the fact that Boyhood didn't make your 3.
I thought Boyhood would be too obvious, and I wanted to use this opportunity to tell people, hey, I guarantee, because I know you guys have been preaching about it, and Boyhood has a slightly higher profile even within some
Totally
mainstream
fair.
art indie circles.
Totally fair.
Whereas The Immigrant and Jodorowsky's Dune, whew, under the radar for most folks.
Right. No, that's fair.
Immigrant
That's fair.
came and went like in
That's
a week.
true.
I know.
So,
I know.
that's
I
fair.
know. I know.
So
Just-
Boyhood, obviously great. We all know about it and love it, but check out those others.
Sure.
I still haven't seen Boyhood. I hope to see it this week.
You're so excited. You're so
am.
excited, Phil.
This
Oh,
is my
man.
excited face.
Woof.
It's what you got, folks.
Okay.
Daniel, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Absolutely.
Always.
We'll have you on again soon.
Sweet.
We'll come up with another reason to attack you and bring you on, and we'll do that.
Cannot wait.
And with that, folks, it'll bring us to the end of another Second Breakfast podcast. For Daniel Carlson, our guest, for Phil Duvall, my co-star, co-host, co-star, dude,
I love
who
you. Whatever.
talks to me. I am Andy Roth. We are Second Breakfast. We'll see you again real soon. Bye bye.
Bye now.
The most important meal of the day, second